Hello and welcome to my forge. For this video I had planned to build some unarmored travelers or pilgrims. First of all, it was about this priest. For this miniature I had no use. Then two things happened. Jens from Tabletop Generals asked me when the story about the Grail Knight will continue, and the Tabletop Eagles used the folk rebel from Fireforge as an imperial militia in a battle report. Greetings to all of you if you're watching. I also linked the channels in the description. After this had happened, I decided to change my pilgrims into Grailpilgrims. There are enough unarmored miniatures in the Victrix spruce, and Fireforge's folk rebel are civilians anyway. One thing I must say in advance. There will be no cutting, sawing or drilling this time, but a lot of green stuff handling. Please keep in mind, these guys should become travelers or pilgrims and no religious fanatics. Well, the difference between them wasn't that great in the Middle Ages, I suppose. I'm starting with a bedroll of a pilgrim. It has to be, as the name says, rolled in the beginning. Following that, the size has to be checked. It was too long, so I shortened it a little bit. When you have the right length, the ends of the roll are flattened. At first I tried this while the material was sticked to the miniature, but it's much easier that way. Also, the rolling would have been easier doing it like this. However, in the end, the blanket has to look like a cylinder. When the bedroll is attached to the miniature, I smooth the green stuff. After this, I draw the edge of the blanket into the material. I also use the silicone chisel to get a small overhang. At this place the blanket is open, that's why it's important that the upper part is higher. If it was the other way around, then vermin and all kinds of dirt could fall into the opening, so I sculpt the upper part as if the edge hangs over the lower part. In the flat surfaces at the ends I press little holes and sculpt the layers of the blanket. One thing is to be reminded, the edge has to be sculpted all around the rolled up blanket or it looks quite awkward. In the end, there are some straps to sculpt, which are drawn with the metal tool and then a little bit deepened, so it looks like the fabric wells up between the straps. Next comes a belt pouch. The green stuff is pressed onto the miniature and brought into shape. Then I mark the area where the flap will be. There are no limits for the shape of the flap. It can be round, an angular shape or a fleur-de-lis. I decided for an angular shape because it's easier to sculpt. After that, the pouch gets some folds. This is the reason why the place for the flap has to be marked. Starting from there, I'm sculpting folds. Around the flap they are a little deeper than at the bottom. The pouch is laced around the top and the items are gathered on the ground, so there are no folds there. Now our friend needs a bigger bag for other utensils. After all, he's on the road for a while, so he has gathered some stuff on his pilgrimage. I'm starting with the belt. For this I place a piece of green stuff around the upper body and start sculpting. In the beginning I tried to sculpt the back and the belt as one piece. This was a big fail because the material twisted every time I changed something at the other side. As for the belt pouch, the belt gets some folds. On the shoulder it squeezes together a little bit and stays like this until it reaches the bag itself. The bag itself is smooth because of the items in it. On the back it's the same procedure. The only difference is that I'm using more green stuff to connect the two belts and also to have a beginning for the bag itself. After the belts are completed, it's time for the body of the bag. In this step it's important that bag and belt become one piece. So I didn't wait for the green stuff to harden. While smoothing it, I also form the material into the shape which the bag will have in the end. Now the two belts and the bag are sculpted together until you can't see that they were different parts. If I had waited for the green stuff to harden in this process, some small gaps could appear and they just don't look good. So either you can always see them, or it's quite an effort to close them. You wouldn't believe it, but such small areas can make a lot of work. The last step is to mold the seizes of the belt into the bag. The bag itself also gets some of them to create the illusion that the weight of the content tears it down. Now let's head back to the flap of the belt pouch. I'm using a different pilgrim this time, just because his pouch is bigger and so it's better visible. The procedure is very simple. A small piece of green stuff is placed in the marked area and just brought into the form that you wish. Then smooth the material and the flap is done. The second Grailpilgrim gets a leatherback. As said before, when I started the video, I wanted to build clerics or pilgrims, and that's why they have so many bags and pouches. In contrast to the first pilgrim, I don't start with the belt, but with the bag itself. The modeling clay is brought into shape and smoothed at the same time. As soon as the chunk forms into a rectangular shape, the raw shape is completed. The bag is made of leather, so it doesn't take the form of the miniature's body. That's why there's a small gap between bag and model that has to be sculpted. After this step is done, it's time for the bag. For this I make a notch in the front and back side to create the effect that the bag is sewn together from different parts. Also, the upper part gets a notch too. When the flap is added, this looks like the material is bent. After the green stuff is hardened, it's again time for the belt. This time it's from leather, so no folds are needed. The green stuff is put on the miniature and then sculpted into the right shape. The flap is the easiest part. A thin layer of green stuff covers the complete top and goes down half of the front. The flap forms a small bulge over the notch, and now this pouch is also completed. In the end, I draw a small notch in the material. This is the place where the flap lies on the pouch. To capture the image of Grailpilgrims, the clothes have to look worn down, so they get patches. For this, I place a small ball of green stuff on the miniature, in this case a farmer from Fireforge's Folk Rebel. The ball is flattened, and so it starts looking like a patch sewn to the shirt. But now you also need seam lines, or it's just a piece of green stuff on a miniature. For this I use the thin end of the tool and make a lot of little notches around the edge. This is done for all four sides and the patch is complete. This one was a little thick, so I had to thin it out. On smooth material it's very easy to do this, so we do the same on folded cloth. In the end it's the same procedure. The model clay is placed on the model and the patch is sculpted. This one here is a little small, so I continue with a bigger one. It's important to include the patch into the folds. At the start I didn't do this and asked myself why it was so weird looking, so I started all over again. One thing that's very nice here, the miniature helps sculpting. You can follow the folds and press the green stuff into them. The patch becomes a little bigger this way, but that's okay. Then there was a big hole there. As for the other pilgrim, this patch also gets a seam line. In the end, the Grailpilgrims look like this. The arms are from Victrix or the Death of Dunharrow. They were leftovers from my Rohirrim conversions, and the tethered look fits perfectly with Grailpilgrims. If you enjoyed the video and want to support my channel, please like, share and subscribe, or leave a comment below. See you soon in my forge.